where's the war? Where's the war? And they assembled them at the place that in Hebrew is called Armageddon. Where is this place? It's agreed almost universally that this is in the Valley of Megiddo, which is ironic because what's referred to is actually not a valley, but a mountain. It's Har Megiddo, the Mount of Megiddo. So the irony of ironies, okay? The literalists say that this is literally the Valley of Megiddo when literally he doesn't say Valley of Megiddo, but Har Megiddo, the Mount of Megiddo. So if you're a literalist, it's not a valley, it's a mountain. So if you're a literalist, now we have to have hundreds of millions of men somewhere on a mountain in Israel. That can't happen. It's not one big enough. It can't happen. You can't assemble hundreds of millions of men in the Himalayas. Unless you go high enough for most of them to die. So what are we talking about here? Well, if there's no place called Armageddon, and if we're talking about the symbolic language of Revelation, we have to look at the fact that there's reliance here on Old Testament prophecy, and specifically to Zechariah 14. Zechariah 14 makes a reference to the Mount of Olives and Jerusalem. Well, wait a minute. Armageddon sounds like the Valley of Megiddo. It doesn't sound like the Mount of Olives, and it doesn't sound like Jerusalem. So although there is no literal place called Armageddon, certainly it would make sense if you're trying to gather millions of men for warfare that it would have to be in that valley, right? Not necessarily. There's similar language in Zechariah 12:3, where the prophet also speaks about Jerusalem, not Megiddo, as the scene of the final conflict. Folks, Armageddon most likely refers to a very well-known place. Listen to this from Kim Barker. Armageddon, the Mount of Gathering or Mount of Assembly, is therefore much more likely a reference to Mount Zion, the earthly counterpart to the heavenly assembly in Revelation 14. We read about that Jesus Christ stands triumphantly on Mount Zion with his people. If true, this means that the reference to Armageddon is not a description of a literal military battle in which men in tanks and airplanes fight against God. Instead, we have an apocalyptic image of the kings of the earth being gathered together by the dragon to wage war against Mount Zion, which is symbolic of the church of Jesus Christ. Which one makes more sense, folks? Hundreds of millions of men bringing tanks to fight against God, or that the dragon, the beast, and the false prophet are assembling to fight against the church? Which one's consistent with what we've seen in Revelation? Which one is consistent with Old Testament prophecy? We're going to read about the New Jerusalem. And we've already seen earlier Jesus standing on Mount Zion. Was it literal? No, it wasn't literal. This is consistent with the rest of the book. This is the same event depicted from yet another camera angle in Revelation. Again, this is Barker, in Revelation 19 to 21, when John sees the beast and the false prophet being thrown into the lake of fire. It is also described in Revelation 20, verses 9 and 10, where those deceived by Satan after he is released from the abyss march across the breadth of the earth and surround the camp of God's people, the city he loves. But fire came down from heaven and devoured them. And the devil who deceived them was thrown into the lake of burning sulfur. There the beast and the false prophet have been thrown. They will be tormented day and night forever and ever. He concludes, therefore, it is certainly correct to think of Armageddon as a final and ultimate battle between Christ and his enemies. But this battle has nothing to do with the plains of Megiddo, the nation of Israel, or the armies of the world fighting against Christ. John is giving us an apocalyptic vision of Satan's final assault upon the church, Mount Zion, Har Megiddo, the Mount of Assembly, an assault which is crushed by Jesus Christ at his return to the earth in judgment.